Kid Hardy and Michael Ford are coming. Ellen Wilkinson, the red flag, she is humming. We get around not as much as Dominic Cummings, even though he's driving blind. We are the Labour grassroots, where like-minded folk dwell. From countryside to city, it's warm and it's witty, the antidote to Pretty Patel. We are the Labour grassroots, time to raise a racket. The future is as bright as Crispin's red jacket. This is the space where we all go hell for leather, free from all the biased BBC blether. Like track and trace, we're better together, just ask Carrie and Meg. Yeah, we got all the people from Inverness, Skegness, Barrow, Inverness, Chester, Leicester, Cirencester, Shrewsbury, Oswald Street, Swansea, Perneckley, Barnsley, Beccles, Nottingham and Eccles. We are the Labour grassroots, time to plant some grass. Where we've always had social distancing between us and the upper class.
Welcome to Labour Grassroots, not the Andrew Marr show. We've got a really beautiful show today with lots of people speaking about how they were inspired to get politically active and to speak out. But to start the show, obviously, we've got our newspaper round. And after the discussion with people who've got politically active, we've got a new section called Activist Corner, where we hear from a campaign that is doing really well or has done really well to inspire us all. And then we've got comedy and music at the end. So I better get started then. I'll start by introducing our one of our newspaper reviewers, Pamela Fitzpatrick. Are you there?
I am. Hi, Crispin. Happy New Year to everybody. A bit late, but anyway.
Happy New Year. You got a scarf on. Is it a bit chilly where you are?
It is. It's chilly everywhere, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah, well, if you've got the heating on, you might be all right.
Yeah, I have.
And we've also got John Dunn in Brighouse. Is it cold where you are, John?
I'm a northern lad. I'm from Derbyshire. I don't feel the cold. I've not even started putting a vest on yet.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, when would you start doing that? I mean, isn't this about right? No.
When it's about -15, that's time to put a vest on.
Oh well, I'm not up to your toughness. What I thought we could start with is is the great news that I know maybe some of you saw Keir Starmer's tweeted on it, that the Queen has actually had a vaccine. How important is this, do you think, Pamela?
Oh, goodness me. I mean, does anybody listen to the Queen? I suppose it's really important people get vaccinated, and there are these anti-vaxxers. And I don't know about you, but I know more and more people who have been affected by the virus, and somebody who died last week. And so anything that can be done to sort of counter the anti-vaxxers, I suppose, is good. But does anybody listen to the Queen? I don't know.
John, are you keen on the Queen's what she's done? Does it excite you?
Well, when I saw that Mrs. Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, because I think we should always give them the real name, had got it, I leapt for joy, because if anybody's at risk, I mean, imagine being stuck in all these palaces while the rest of the world is suffering from coronavirus, and at least if it prevents her getting the disease, then all her footmen and all her butlers are going to get that protection as well. And yeah, I leapt for joy at the thought that she's in the at-risk category.
Sorry, my son just entered the room, and it was a little bit difficult for me there. So I muted myself. Now, where were we? Let me quickly move on to I was going to speak about. Oh yes, this is the next story. Gavin Williamson is accused of running a chumocracy in that a Tory donor who gave £100,000 to the party has been given the contract for IT for schools. Is this something that he should be held to account for? Should he resign for this, Pamela?
Yes, but I mean, they've been doing this throughout the pandemic. They've given away billions to their mates. And I hate the way they call it chumocracy. It makes it sound like some nice cuddly thing. It's corruption on a huge scale. And whilst everybody else, we've got other stories about people losing their home, being without food. We've got here the Tories making money, their friends making money out of a disaster. And of course, we are doing so badly in this country in managing the virus that they ought to go. They ought to all stand down, but there's no chance of that because they've got no integrity.
Right. I mean, I think this is just like you say. It's one story of what the Tories are doing, but it's pretty appalling because when you look at these other stories that have come out today, which is 70,000 households have lost their homes during the pandemic. And also this story here about eviction looms for over 840,000 despite reprieve. What is this, you know, are those people who've made a mint out of this this pandemic, should they be made to pay for this sort of stuff? Because I can't see how the country can sustain can sustain these people if they're making millions.
Absolutely, Crispin. It's outrageous. It's a disgrace. And the papers really are largely, I mean, they imagine if this was Jeremy doing this, if it was a Labour government doing this. And I'm glad that there are these articles about the evictions because most people think evictions stopped. But as some of you know, I work in a law centre. And what's happened is that there have been evictions continuing, but they've been illegal evictions. So the landlord just comes round and changes the locks. And the thing is, that's a criminal offence. And when some people are told by the council to contact the police don't actually realise it's a criminal offence and do nothing. I mean, I can't say all of them, but that has happened. So yes, it's a disgrace that anybody's losing their home, losing their job, being without enough money to feed their family. And yet we've got Tories who are making money out of this disaster. You wouldn't even mind if they'd handled it properly, but we are so behind most other countries in managing the virus. Why are we in another lockdown? Why did we have Eat Out to help out, for goodness sake? It was ridiculous when you look back at the last year. I'm so angry about it. So many people have lost their lives or loved ones this year.
John, do you think that the people who've made all this money from the pandemic, that this is evidence that there is money out there that can pay for it?
Oh yeah. I mean, this is disaster capitalism on steroids. These people are raking it in, and as always, it's our people on the sharp end. It's either our people that are dying of COVID or these poor unfortunate souls who are being evicted, who are losing their homes in the height of winter as well. I mean, we're paying the price for God knows how many years now of neoliberalism, when we went away from manufacturing industry to landlordism and people cashing in on housing. And when all this is over, we've not got to depend on anybody doing this for us. We've got to take to the streets and revenge ourselves on these bastards. Because if this doesn't bring it home, what capitalism and its people who practice it on us do, then nothing ever will. We're in the worst possible situation. People caught between having to go to work or starve, people being thrown on the streets, people dying because of what's happened to our health service. Yeah, these people have got to be made accountable, and they've got to pay the price for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple more stories that I thought were interesting. One is an opinion piece in the Morning Star. Andrew Scattergood, who's one of the two chairs, I think, co-chairs of Momentum, says that the left is still in a better position than it was before Jeremy Corbyn. Do you think that that we should be comforted by that, or do you think it's something that is just a false kind of comfort? Do you think we should actually build on that, or is it just something that's making us feel complacent, Pamela?
I groaned when I saw this article. I mean, yes, some of it I agree with. Who couldn't agree with it? But it's kind of a lot of meaningless platitudes. And what it reveals is that Momentum made huge mistakes in the past, and it looks like they're not learning from those mistakes. And one of the big problems was the lack of political education, and that's still there. But also, anybody who's worked in unions or been on the left for many years knows that you've got to work collaboratively with other people. And so this kind of whole headline, maybe they're not responsible for the headline, but it comes across more as though they want to recruit people to Momentum rather than actually setting out a bold agenda. So people are leaving the party every day. So when is this agenda going to come out about what they're actually going to do? I think they've been too timid, really, throughout. And, you know, even just the kind of NCG elections, there was so much fighting around there. People are crying out for some leadership from the left. So that's what needs to happen. What is the bold agenda? What's going to happen now? I think their conference isn't till September. By then, how many members will have left? So what happened is we had a whole group of people, thousands joined the Labour Party because of Jeremy, but we failed to educate the people politically to deal with the onslaught of abuse and attacks that they were going to face, and also how to defend themselves against those attacks. But also this focus on local government. Okay, you get people trained to be councillors. How many of those will actually get through that process? Because I know what happens, and the right will mobilise to keep anybody even off the list of standing to be a councillor. But say some get through. I'm a councillor, I'm on the left. What do? You find yourself often with a whole group of other right-wing councillors. You have to vote a lot. You have to accept the kind of majority vote. Of course, I would do that anyway. Having worked in trade unions or been a trade union activist, but often what's happening is Labour councils are simply just carrying out the cuts of the Tories, and the Labour councils are then the ones that people on the ground blame because they see the councils as being responsible for all the problems that they're facing. So I don't think this is the answer. I'm disappointed, very disappointed with the headline, but maybe they're not responsible for that.
I think the headline's a bit misleading, but
it is.
I'm going
but one thing, one positive thing I would say is that I do agree that there's more people on the left who are connected now than prior to 2015. So to that extent, it is true.
Okay, well, I've only got time for one more story, and I'm going to move to this one here that I think is quite interesting. That Twitter has taken off Donald Trump from he can't tweet anymore. He's banned from Twitter. Is that a good thing that's happened, or do you think it sets a bad precedent? John, what do you think?
No, we can't let social media giants be censors. The biggest danger of taking Trump off is that you make him a martyr in front of these. You know, we've got in America, we've not just got a rabid right wing, we've got a rabid right wing that carry guns of all sorts of descriptions. And to make a martyr out of Trump, when, you know, he's just been defeated, his attempted coup was defeated. So just stop this attempt at censorship of anybody, because Zuckerberg and people within the social media hierarchies have been equally as ready to stop us sharing things, to say this goes against our policy, etc., etc. We'll get nowhere just by no platforming people because we don't agree with their ideas. And I would have had a lot more time for Twitter doing this if over the last few years they've been campaigning in America for some sort of gun control and getting the right-wing militias off the street. And I don't think that they've done much to censor their sort of stuff. If what I've seen over the years, especially there is, you know, some of the right wing's response to Black Lives Matter. And if we, and again, the big thing is, if we've got to depend on the likes of these multi-billionaires to protect us, then we're in a powerless state. You know, we'll defeat the likes of Trump, we'll defeat the likes of his followers out in the street, not on the pages of Twitter.
Right. Interesting point. Now, look, I'm aware about the time because we've got a lot to go through. But what I wanted to do with this show in particular was to encourage more people to speak out politically, because this is a really difficult time that we're living in, and we need as many people to feel confident about speaking out when there's stuff going on they need to talk about. And I know that it's intimidating to be asked to speak on a political platform or to make any speech, even in a small meeting, if you haven't done it before. And what I wanted to do was speak to people who have made that leap, who have started off not having any idea what they're going to do, and then found their voice politically. And to start, I mean, I thought I'd talk to Pamela, because obviously, Pamela, you were a candidate in the last general election. Were you always able to speak politically? And can you remember the time when you actually first spoke and how it felt and what you did? What brought you to do that?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I'm from a working class Irish background, grew up in Harlesden, left school quite young, worked in a shop. I didn't go to university till much later. So I didn't have those experiences of debating or feeling that I had a right to speak. And I actually, if I'd been asked to speak in public, I would have been completely terrified. And the first time I started speaking, semi-publicly to a group was because I got a job working in a citizens advice bureau. And back in those days, it was before we had a kind of increase in asylum seekers coming to the UK, and I started working with a lot of Eritrean asylum seekers, and their stories were so powerful, and I was representing them at various things, at tribunals and all sorts of things, and I cared so much about what was happening to them and wanting to make other people aware of what was happening, that I did start to speak out. And the first times I spoke, I have to say, I was reading from a paper and I couldn't hold the paper because I was shaking so much. So I had to put the paper on a desk because I was so terrified. And it kind of grew from there, to be honest. And it's mainly been through my work and having to kind of give a voice to people who didn't have a voice. And I really identified with that because of my background and feeling that there are too many people who feel entitled to speak. And that is both men and women, actually. And there are all sorts of groups who feel that they have no right to have a voice. And so I think what you do here is really good, Crispin and the team, because I can't think of another forum that invites people, working class people, to come on and speak alongside people like Jeremy and John and other trade union leaders. And so I think, you should be proud of that. It's really good. It's terrifying. And I have to say, when I've been speaking out publicly, so I ended up speaking at conferences and all sorts of things for my job. And I found that easy because it wasn't about me. But when I was a candidate and being a left woman, I came under huge scrutiny, and there's been awful stuff written about me in the press and all sorts of things. And what I've learned is you just don't read it because you know what their agenda is. I know what I am, what I'm about. And they're there to kind of destroy people who are trying to do good things. So I felt sorry for you over New Year, and I kind of felt, we need to give you some tactics of which some of us have been on the sharp end. But it is difficult for women, and I do think women have a harder time within the Labour Party. There's a lot of sexism and a lot of not listening to women. I don't think that's true of your programme at all, Crispin. It's great that you're doing this.
I wasn't asking you to say that. Thank you very much for the support, though. And it's good. It's good to hear you. So you were so angry about the people you were representing that you actually just couldn't help but go up. And even though you were shaking, you carried on, and it made you stronger just to go through that experience. So I'm just praising a little bit, because I'm going to move on to John now, because I would imagine, John, that you've always spoken politically. Is that right, John?
Not really. I mean, I got into politics obviously through Clay Cross and the whole issue around the Rent Act in the 70s. But the first time I had to speak publicly was to 1,500 people at a Labour Party Young Socialist conference in 1973, purely because I was from Clay Cross and I was physically ill for it. I vomited continuously with nerves, and I think I got up and I made an absolute fool of myself, and continued doing it. And people might say I still do that to this day, that I don't string many coherent sentences together, but I stuck at it. And I'll be honest, Crispin, the best apprenticeship I had about public speaking was having to get up in a pit canteen, when at times the nicest thing they say to you is "sit down, twat," and stuff like that. And so you know, it gets to the point where it becomes almost routine, and now I'm at the point where I do a lot of it and I actually love it. And I just say to people, don't be scared. If you've got a message, if you're angry, let it out and shout it as loud as you can, and don't let anybody stop you.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to move on to Raj, who I've known from Ealing campaigns. Are you there? Are you there, Raj?
Yes, I'm here.
You've been involved in Save Our Hospitals campaigns and lots of other campaigns. When was the first time you decided to speak? Were you always a confident speaker?
No, I wasn't actually. I mean, you might say I started in campaigning when I was quite young, at college level. When I've always been a kind of a social justice person, against the wars, when President Johnson started bombing Vietnam, and when we had the issue and we were campaigning for free Mandela and Palestinian issues. So politically, I was always aware. But in terms of, you can see I'm wearing a hat, Unite. And then after I left college, and then I went to work at a number of places, including Ford Motor Company, where I became a shop steward, and I had to speak to the workers on the shop floor and address mass meetings or sectional meetings and negotiate with the management. I kind of developed from campaigning, and as I said, and I also was involved in when Blair Peach was killed against the National Front. So I've always been a kind of a social person, but I got involved in the trade unions. And through the training there, become even more confidence. I don't always get my words in correct order, but I kind of speak from the passion. And I only joined the Labour Party quite late, because I only wanted to involve myself in the trade union and social movement, not on a political level, because I know how politics could corrupt. So politics, I only involved last 15 years of my life. And it's been quite a rough ride. So I always encourage people to get involved, to organize, whatever scenario they're in. And nowadays, with the Black Lives Matter and the climate change, we need to get the young people involved, and we also need to get our Black activists more involved, Crispin. And I think we are fighting for equality and justice, and and as well as women's rights. we need to be in the forefront of the conversation, not only party politics, but beyond that.
Right. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing. And I'm going to move to Southport, to Vonni, who's been on the show a few times. Now, Vonni, you're a councillor.
I am.
But that's not how you've not always been confident about speaking about politics. I mean, you
No.
seem very confident now. How did you get into speaking at all?
Well, my story is a wee bit different from everybody else that I've heard, because in March this year, I will be 35 years sober. So I learned to speak in AA, because what it did for me was I was absolutely terrified, because I spent 20 years drunk, you know, and I had no self-worth, self-confidence or anything like that. And through the years in AA, you have to speak out to get yourself better. You know, you've got to speak out, and the fellowship is a wonderful thing. And I think that's why I like this so much, because this feels like a fellowship to me. And I ended up having to speak at conferences, you know, with 2,000-3,000 alcoholics in the room, and share my story, which was hard, because it's not nice talking about the things that you've done in the past, but I got myself better. And I started work in, it wasn't DWP then, it was Unemployment Benefit Service. I was 9 months sober, and I became a union rep. And in '98, after the Tony Blair government came in, I stopped working in a job centre and went out and started working in the community. And I was running a programme for people that had drug dependency problems, getting them back into work. And this expanded over a few years, and people that were alcohol dependent, homeless people in the criminal justice system. And then I ended up with asylum seekers, refugees, mental health. And I also set up a programme for people in street sex workers in Liverpool. And I loved it. I thought they'd carry me out in a box. I never wanted to leave, because I could see the difference we were making in people's lives, because we were giving them their lives back. You know, I was seeing miracles happening every day. And in 2010, when the coalition came in, the first thing they did was stop the funding for my programmes. And I stuck it out until 2012. And one of my clients who he was very vulnerable, and they stopped his money, and he ended up dead. And I thought, I don't want to be complicit in this anymore, and I retired. And I joined the Labour Party, because before, my job was quite political. I was taking ministers around, because we were really successful. We helped over 12,000 people in these categories find jobs, proper jobs too, not 0 hours. We didn't have 0 hours then. And so I joined the Labour Party, and I didn't do much. And then my husband died very suddenly in March 2014. And I thought, what am I going to do now? You know, because I didn't want to live in AA meetings and things like that, because I was a long time sober then, you know. And they put a letter through my door for the AGM, and I went to it. And this was in 2014. And I started getting active then. And we had our general election in 2015, and then Jeremy became leader, and he was inspirational, you know. He came after the 2017 election. He came to Southport, and he did a rally on the beach, and regional office asked me to be the warm-up act and talk about the social inclusion issues that I dealt with, you know, the need that we had to look after people. My grandfather always told me, them that have, look after them that haven't. And that's what I've done all my life. And that was, I was terrified. I know what John says about being sick, because I read about Barbara Streisand, and every time she goes on, she's sick. You know, well, that's what I felt like, and had it all written down. But it was so windy on the beach that I couldn't use my paper, so I just had to open my mouth and go with it, you know. And Steve Rotherham was comparing it, and he had to tell me to shut up, you know, because once you start me, I can't stop. And I've been very lucky to you know, I spoke at conferences when I was in DWP, because I felt that what I was doing with people, we had to share it round, you know, and it just came, you know. And I've always found that when you speak from the heart and you have a passion for things, that comes over. So I've never been one of these ones. My pet hate is people that put PowerPoints up and then read them, because I'm perfectly able to read, but I have sort of lines, you know, and I talk about them. And Jeremy, I've been lucky to host Jeremy 4 times in Southport, and I've watched him speaking, and that's what he does with his little notebook. He has one words and then he talks to it, you know. And anybody that's been at a meeting with Jeremy will know how inspirational he is, because he definitely inspired me, because he talks about people, you know. And I became a councillor. I was one of the first 2 councillors ever elected to Sefton Council in 2018. And so now, you know, I don't find it difficult to speak. In fact, shutting me up's a problem.
Well, I'd love to hear more, because, but you know, it's great to hear you, and you're an inspiration to everyone. For what?
Oh, I don't think so. I'm just ordinary, you know.
No,
I'm just ordinary.
But I mean, in a way, it's a bit like Jeremy. I mean, he doesn't say much at all either. It's just we have to. What you've said is we have to help others, and that's kind of. We have to put ourselves through this need to vomit sometimes in order to do that. But thank you very much for coming on, and I really appreciate your time on the show. Thanks. I'm moving on to Ian Hodson. You there, Ian?
It's been up a new year, pal. You all right, mate?
Yeah. So Ian, you've been you're a very formidable speaker. I've seen you a few times speaking at rallies, and often the PA nearly breaks down when you're talking. What other than that's being light-hearted, but where did you get this idea you could speak, and what was it like the first time you spoke?
Well, in all honesty, Crispin, that's probably the worst part of my job. I'm not a comfortable, confident speaker. I know people will be surprised to hear that, but I'm not. I mean, it's one of the biggest fears that I have is public speaking. But because of my role, it's something that I've had to do, and because I want to represent the people that have put me in this position, I feel obligated to do that. So I mean, that's the reason why I take part in speaking publicly. It's because some of those people I represent have many things to say, but don't feel that they are in a position to do it. So I will, you know, express their views when I speak. But what I've tried to do is give an opportunity for those people to give me the content of what they want to say, to give me the information that they want out there. And like Pamela was saying, in a platform like Zoom, I think what this has done is brought an opportunity for people who maybe have not wanted to speak previously. It's given them an opportunity to have their voice heard, even on a small platform, you know, to be able to get their point of view across. I mean, I'm very grateful to people like John Dunn. You know, they inspire me to speak. Andy Birchall, who was a tutor and obviously a miner during the miners' strike, who taught me how to speak publicly, because I used to write my speeches and then I used to try and read them, and it was very robotic. And because I used to think I had to say everything that was on that bit of paper. I mean, now obviously, if you see me speak, I don't use that, because what I try and do is have a conversation about the things that's happened to me or the people that I know, because to me, you know, those are lived experiences. So I'm putting across my experiences of life, or those of the people I represent.
Well, thank you, Ian. I can't believe that you would never always speak. I can imagine you speaking when you were like a toddler. But anyway, thanks for coming on. And I'm going to speak to Laura Daly in Sedgefield. Are you there, Laura?
Hello. Yes, I'm here.
So you wrote to say that you're at your first meeting, you were you were pregnant and you were shouted down, but you carried on and you've become very confident now. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so it was my first ever political meeting I went to, and it turned out when I got there, it was a selection meeting, so passions were running high anyway. Things that I didn't really understand at the time as well, because I wasn't involved in politics. I just was looking to try and get involved, and I was 8 months pregnant, so it was massive. And everyone was fighting, and I tried to I think I tried to make a point about something inane, and I just got screamed at by these big old men, because I think there was one other woman in the room. And honestly, I was just shocked that I didn't even have a comeback then. And I just felt so sort of intimidated. And I thought, you know what, if it wasn't for the fact that I had friends in the Labour Party and my husband was there as well, I would never have gone back to another meeting. I would just not put myself through that. It was horrendous. And then I started to get really angry about it. But I think, especially as a woman, you sort of feel this imposter syndrome that you really shouldn't be there and you shouldn't really be speaking. This is, you know, somebody else's world. But the more that I got involved and the more meetings I did end up going to, I realised that these people just wanted to talk. It didn't even matter if they made any sense. They just wanted to sort of be important. So I got a little bit more confidence just through talking to my friends and having a bit of support there. But I think the first time I ever actually did a speech politically, was at the Labour Party conference. And there's a few people on this call who were there. Oh God, I tell you what, talk about a baptism of fire. I got up on the stage and I turned around and I was like, oh, this was a bad idea. Oh, I felt so sick. There was just thousands of people. But I did it, and then I sort of felt really proud that I'd managed to get through it without being sick, because I'll be honest, I did feel really sick. And then people would come and talk to me after and say, oh, I really like what you said, and give you that sort of bit extra confidence. And I realized that for the most part, a lot of women didn't feel like they were able to get up and talk. And that sort of got me involved in activism with women, and so I started the Women's Banner Group, which was designed to recognise and remember the achievements of women, and just trying to bring other women along. And so I've had to speak at a lot of events through that. And I think the key to getting up and speaking is, number one, just to do it and don't overthink it, because it is scary, and even the most professional people do feel sick. But also, just believe in what you're saying. If you've got a subject that you're passionate about, it doesn't matter if you've got it written down or not, because you'll feel what you're saying anyway, and you'll bring people along with you. And just to touch on something I think Pamela was saying about having platforms like this, which is fantastic. You know, you're squeezing a load of people in a day who ordinarily wouldn't get the chance to speak to a lot of people, which is fantastic. And so we've also co-founded the Socialist Think Tank as well, which is trying to get working class voices to talk about socialism. People who we've had some sort of MPs who are very used to speaking, but also people just in everyday life who do amazing things in their communities but don't shout about it because, well, they're too shy to, and they don't I think the thing is with socialists as well, we have this thing where we don't feel like we can really sell ourselves, and it's just like, oh well, that's just what nice people do, they help each other out. But actually, if you don't tell people about it, then it becomes an issue, doesn't it? Because then you just get hidden away. So it is about bringing people along with you and just having a bit of passion about what you're talking about. It really helps give you that bit of confidence.
Well, thank you very much for coming along and sharing your story, and it's inspiring to hear. I just thought, because I didn't know that you'd spoken at the conference, so I wasn't pointed to that. I thought I was going to bring someone in who did speak at conference. I'm going to bring her in now so we can try and understand how nerve-wracking it is from someone else about speaking at conference. Leah, are you there?
I'm here, comrade.
Now, Leah, I've got a clip of you speaking at conference, and
Okay.
I think it shows how.
Can I just say it starts off a bit calmer than I think where you're going to.
Well, it probably does, but I had to cut it down a bit. But anyway, this is your speech at conference.
I'm going to grab my little moment in the spotlight for Hastings and Rye, and also for the Jewish Voice for Labour. The Jewish Labour movement have every right to organise in this Labour Party. The right they do not have is to speak for me, the other Jewish members of Hastings and Rye, and many other Jewish Labour members in this place. They do not speak for me, and part of what we were proposing was to make sure not only on the issue of anti-Semitism, although that was the dominant issue at the time, but on any issue that you take a sounding from a wide range of views. And we have proof from the response to Naomi Winborn-Idrissi's fabulous speech yesterday, and from the phenomenal launch of our organisation last night, with standing room only, with Ken Loach, with trade union leaders like Len McCluskey and Josh McDonnell promising support, that we know those other Jewish voices exist. So we really want absolute clarification. Of course I'm going to remit. The pressure's too great. And I can tell you that right up until now, we're getting texts from our people in Hastings saying, don't remit. We've had delegates asking us not to remit. But we're not going to risk. We're not going to risk being seen as the splitters. And we're not going to risk any chance of absolute clarity that there is not a collision, a colliding, whatever the word is, that you can treat anti-Semitism and make that accusation every time you criticise the despicable behaviour of the State of Israel towards the Palestinian people. We remit.
Now I could play the applause there for.
Don't worry, it's not necessary.
But, we haven't got much time.
No.
So what comes across there is you look so. There's that energy that's in your voice, and then everything you're saying. It's like you have to get this point across. And was that the first time you'd spoken at conference?
It's the only time I've managed to speak. I think I might have moved anyway. It doesn't matter. I've rarely been a delegate. I wasn't a member for ages. I know that we've got very little time, but in a way, the journey from where I started in terms of speaking to being able to do that, I can assure you, I had a very detailed speech written for that because it was a rule change, boring, and I really wish I'd fought it harder because it led to 2.1.8, which is one of the reasons we're in the mess that we're in. I had this detailed speech written out, and in the end, it basically threw it out the window because I was so angry. I won't give you the whole story. That's for another meeting. But the point in terms of confidence at public speaking is very much what other people have said. If you care about something enough, if you're passionate about it, you will get up and speak. And what we need to understand is that our voices are as valuable as anyone else's. So those entitled, I also came from a working class background. Obviously, I come from a Jewish background, relatively orthodox. So there was no question of women ever getting up, doing their bar mitzvahs, reading out in the synagogue. Didn't happen in my synagogue. There was nothing, even blah 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 blah. And the very first time that I said anything was And I did go to university because I'm that privileged generation that got full grants and free education. And there was a discussion in the student union. I hated student politics. I spent much more of my time outside. I was in Cardiff actually working with the steelworkers in Newport and Ebbw Vale who were having threats. That was much more relevant to me than, but anyway, you have to support comrades in the Labour Club. And they were proposing a motion on no platform for fascists in that very debate formal style. And the proposer and the seconder spoke and no one spoke up in support. And I literally found my hands sort of going up like this. And I went, I agree with what they said, and sat down incredibly fast. And I just felt, you know what, you really care about this. If you're going to make an impact, you better just overcome it. And John said, I think earlier on, that he was shaking and terrified when he had to speak in front of an LPYS conference. I never did that. I went to LPYS conferences. The world doesn't end because you're frightened, or even if you make a fool of yourself. And that's what you have to get. And I think I shared with I know I shared with Crispin in my email exchange that apparently people are more scared of public speaking than they are of getting cancer.
Wow.
So just let that sink in. And all of us very ordinary people, Mary, we're all ordinary people. And I really echo what you recognize what Laura says, and it was part of the death knell in a way for all those enthusiastic young people who came into the Labour Party, then turned up at their branch meeting and go, I think we need to move the next point of order, next business. Can we have the report? I mean, you're going, what? All these enthusiasts never came again, and we didn't at that time have any sort of infrastructure to follow them. I also rejoined after 30 odd years distance, but just get that if you care about what will get you up is caring about something, and don't assume that the person who puts their hand up, which is usually, not invariably, but usually an entitled man. I now chair Labour group. I'm a councillor, or will be until May. And I cannot tell you, I know they're quite a good bunch of people and we've got lots of women, and yet it's always, there are certain men who will put their hands up immediately, almost before the person presenting the item has finished speaking, their hand is up. And you know, so, but I know it's not just women. So all I'm saying is the world will not collapse because you make a fool of yourself, or because you're scared, or because you're shaking.
Yeah.
Just if it's something you care about. Yeah.
I've got to move on. Sorry, I've got to move on because there's a few people I thought I'd bring in. Jenny, are you there? Jenny?
Yes, I am.
Are you here?
Yeah, I'm just trying to. Yeah, I'm here. Sorry about that. I've had a bit of a crisis in my own CLP at the moment, and I had to deal with it. Yes, I'm here. So I can't even begin to emulate Leah's attempts at speaking at conference, but I thought I would give a little story about my own experience of the first time I ever spoke at a conference. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
And it was at a NUPE conference many years ago. And I'd been attending NUPE conferences for years as a visitor before then, and now here I was having to propose a motion which was actually about the involvement of women in NUPE. I was absolutely scared out of my wits, and I spent many days writing and rewriting my 3-minute speech. I practiced in front of the mirror. I checked it out with my other trade union colleagues before I got onto the rostrum. And then I went and delivered this speech at this proposing speech at conference. I felt quite a lot in control until I mounted the podium and the mic, and the mic threw me off because my voice boomed out, which I didn't expect, of course. just before I went to go on the podium, several members rushed up to me and said, "Can you include this? Can you include that?" I said, "No, I've practiced it for days on end. I know it almost by heart, and I don't think I've got the courage to add anything else, ad lib, into what I've practiced." So I got up onto the podium. I said my bits. Halfway through my bits, I felt myself woozing around and black and white images in front of me. I was absolutely scared out of my wits. I got through it. I stumbled, literally stumbled off the podium, sat on the nearest seat and put my head between my legs in order to stop myself from fainting. That's how scared I was. What I did get through it, and I apologise to the members that I couldn't say what they wanted me to say, but at least I said what I had planned to say in the time allotted. From there, I then went on to the TUC Women's Conference as a delegate, and found myself popping up arbitrarily onto the podium, putting my hand up and coming up and making unrehearsed speeches like I'd been doing it for years. And it was like I'd crossed the Rubicon, and I'd managed to conquer it, basically. So my message to you is, first of all, do what I did, which is write your speech down, learn it, but don't read it out. Write down the buzzwords, write down the bullet points to remind you of what you wanted to say, and then say it. There's nothing worse than reading out a speech. And as I've just done here, a good way of actually attracting attention is to actually tell a little personal story about yourself, because then people start listening. To what the rest of what you've got to say.
Can I just come in now, because I'm worried about the time, but with next week, we're going to do a show next week with tips on how to speak with some of the people who've been on here and some who haven't managed to get a chance to speak, and that would be really useful if you could join that as well. I'm going to move on because there's some people who will probably want to kill me if they don't get a chance to speak. And one person I'd like to speak to is Dean, who has many times tried to get on, but has had problems with the IT. Are you there, Dean?
I am, Christy. Hello.
Oh, you can't get your picture. But your voice is heard, Dean. Oh, you're there? Yeah. All right. Okay, there you are. Right. You've got about 2 minutes, Dean, to tell us about your experience of speaking.
Okay, mine's slightly different from the other people who have been speaking. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
It's more from my employment. I am a manager, so by default, you need to be able to communicate. I'm not a natural speaker, and I can relate to some of the stories that I've been told today. When you're in a room of 500 people and all of a sudden you're the one that gets picked out, you've got to speak to the room with no notice, no time to prepare. Really daunting. I can remember the first time that happened. I wanted to faint. I really did. I didn't. To a certain extent, I wished I had, because I probably would have got carried out of the room, and that would have been that. My point is to people who want to come forward and start speaking is it's something that you never really get over. You can use the nerves to in a positive way. It's probably good that you are nervous, because otherwise you can come across as arrogant. Whenever you're speaking, I take the point that you try and put something personal in there, a personal story that can make emphasises on things. It's just something you have to do. You know, it is difficult. It's nice when you've got a like-minded audience, because it's part of it, knowing your audience, knowing what you want to say. When you're in a room and the people are not 100% on your side with what you want to say, that is really, really difficult, and you have to be prepared for anything that gets thrown at you. And I mean that word-wise, not literally, although I do say it can happen. So that's really good to say. Watch people speaking. I've seen Jeremy a couple of times. I've seen John McDonnell. Make the opportunity to go and stand with speakers and learn from them, and just give it a go.
All right, well, thank you, Dean. I'm going to try and get a few more people in now, quickly. Astrid, I haven't heard you speak before. You've come on.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, I'd like to say that I feel I came from admin, so I'd never had to speak at work, and I always had, although I was into acting, I was convinced that I couldn't speak publicly, and I never would, being a basically shy person. But when I got into politics, because I cared about the issues, particularly homelessness, I wanted to speak, but I took my time to see what was happening in the meetings. And the first time I spoke, I had something prepared, and I think that's fatal because you need to listen to what everyone is saying, and you need to just talk as if you're in your sitting room with your family, you know, trying to get your word in edgeways and just expressing yourself and being yourself. And, you know, just to finish, because I know we're short of time, as Tommy Cooper said, we all have butterflies, but the trick is to get them to fly in formation. And I think that was a brilliant thing to say, to help people. And I felt when I went to conference that it was absolutely fantastic how everyone spoke, and each person was interesting, even if they weren't as brilliant as Leah at really being so strong and emotive. Even people who spoke less in that way were interesting because they were saying it was the first time, they were enthusiastic, and that wasn't reported in the press or on the news, that it was a massive movement of young, all ages, and people from different walks of life who were speaking out in a really interesting way, but being themselves, not having to be performers. Anyway, that's true.
It seems to be if you be yourself and throw away the notes, then you've got a good chance. Yeah. But obviously you might have to throw up a bit before getting on stage, and you might well faint after, but don't worry about that. It's like going to the dentist. Rona, are you there, Rona?
I'm here, Crispin. I'm going to try to be as quick as possible because I know we're running out of time. But the very first time I spoke in public politically, I had just come back from Scotland. I had been a carer for my late mother. She had just died. And the leadership contests were going on, and I went to a question and answer session with Jeremy Corbyn. And I spoke up about the work capability assessment and the fact that so many disabled people were being killed by this government. And afterwards, Jeremy had been very kind because he was very sick, and they were leaving questions for the very end. And I stuck my hand up, and he told the moderator to ask me to speak first. He didn't know me; we'd never met. And I thanked him for his kindness, and he said, well, thank you for being so eloquent. I never think of myself as eloquent. I was a disabled ex-carer. I felt completely worthless, and he said that I was eloquent. And that made me think, well, you know, if this wonderful man thinks that I'm eloquent, and perhaps I don't have a lot of self-awareness, and perhaps I'm more eloquent than I think I am. And slowly but surely, I got involved in other political events because I noticed that disabled people were invisible and marginalized, and nobody spoke about disability. Nobody spoke about the DWP. I ended up speaking at the People's Assembly on that issue, and then I ended up representing my trade union at a conference a couple of years ago at the TUC. I was representing equity at the TUC conference. And most recently, I've been hosting Zoom meetings. So I think I just really want to keep this short, but I just want to leave everyone with something that Jeremy Corbyn said to me about the fact that I actually said that I thought he was quite an extraordinary person. And he said that we're all ordinary people, but we're all capable of extraordinary things. So I just, you know, for those of you like Mary, for example, Leah, you know, extraordinary speakers who don't think, you know, they don't think they're particularly special or different or unique, but, you know, I think they are. And it's because we are all ordinary people, but we are all capable of extraordinary things. And I've had 2 strokes, So I tend to sort of always make sure that I have my notes with me, because otherwise I lose my train of thought because I've had vascular damage from strokes. So it's important to make notes, but it's also quite useful if you don't actually say the speech word for word, and you kind of know in your heart what you're going to say, but you know, if you write a few notes first. That's all.
I mean, we will talk about this next week, about the actual tips for how to make it work. I mean, I might have put my foot in it by saying throw the paper away, and people say no, don't throw it away. I don't want to. I don't know. Maybe paper's good, but in some cases, I'm going to bring on quickly a couple more people. Vonni in Durham. Are you there, Vonni?
I am. I'm in the northwest part of Durham, which is the best part of Durham, in my opinion. Just starting.
So we haven't got very long, but would you be able to speak for a minute or two?
Yeah, I will. I've kind of thrown away what I was going to say, because a lot of it has already been said, and I don't want to repeat things because I know we're short of time. I got involved in political. Here, having my political voice heard through the LGBT plus movement, and then in the Labour Party. And in the Labour Party, I've come across loads of barriers, a lot of which have already been talked about in the comments today, and I would agree with pretty much every single one of them. But also, I just think it's important that women's voices and LGBT plus voices and any minority voices are heard. So I want to disagree with some of the public speaking comments that have been, and some of the advice. I think that is a different conversation from what you asked me to speak about today.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't matter if you're confident, if you're articulate, if you feel you need to be heard, it's building that confidence up to get that message out there. And I think it's took me a long time to get to the point where I can speak publicly without stammering, which is something not many people know about me. When I was younger, I had quite a bad stammer. I'm now a teacher, so I have trained that out of my voice. So I just think we need to be supporting each other, even if we're not the best public speakers. And I think the best thing we can do for that is listen. Listen respectfully, even if someone isn't the best speaker, even if, you know, if someone's standing up and speaking, don't be that person who then pulls them down. It doesn't matter if they're speaking the most confidently. I'm trying to think of the word there because it's not what I was planning to say. This is what happens. So I think even if you disagree with them, you know, respect people for having the courage to get up and say what they believe and listen to those voices and don't put them down. And that's something we need to work on in the Labour movement, even on the left, because honestly, it is dominated by white male voices. And I think that's the truth. But yes, thank you for letting us come on there and make that point, Crispin.
I'm sorry you didn't get more time. Maybe you can come on next week and talk about the tips for how to do a good speech, because coming from that background you had with stammering and stuff, it's really interesting to hear your story. Sorry, there's not been much time for anyone. I know Carole's waiting to speak. Carole, I might not be able to fit you in for long.
No.
It's a busy show, but can I
Crispin, don't worry. I just want to say that as a child, I chatted a lot. And as you know, I often go off the subject. Yeah. And I was often told by my extended family, not by my mum, dad and brothers, I have to say, but often by my extended family, that I was a jaw me dead and a chatterbox and to shh a lot of the time. And what that did was that shut me up. So through my education, I didn't ask things. I was very inquisitive, but I didn't put my hand up. I didn't ask things. I didn't have the confidence to speak out. And there were many times I wanted to. And I get a bit emotional because, just to say, I did some union. I joined the union very early on, now ago. And I did some union training, and that actually helped me. So I think if you're in a union, do the union training. It's free. It's public speaking. My dad was at Cable Street against the fascists and told me lots of different things. My dad was a quiet little bloke, and you'd never think he said boo to a goose. But he told me, if you want to say something, girl, you bleed and say it, and you say it loud, and you make sure people hear, because there's a lot of people ain't got a voice, and you might need to be their voice. So when the EDL came to Walthamstow and tried to run over our town hall and take over our high street, I stood up and I had a voice. And I think that the public speaking helped me early on, and then that helped me on. And then I became a candidate in an election, and I had to speak to people at the door. I never got it right always. I didn't always have the answers, but I said I would find the answers. And I had heckling and all sorts. And I would thank the hecklers and try and come back with something a bit witty just to break the atmosphere. But everything else really has been said. So
okay, well we'll have another show next week about speaking and tips for it. I want to move on, I'm afraid. And I'm sorry, Irene, you've got your hand up, but we will bring you in for a later discussion. Thank you everyone who's contributed, and I'm sorry to anyone who I couldn't bring in just because time wouldn't allow it. Now, what we're going to do now is we've got a brand new section of the show, which is called Activist Corner, and it's presented by Libby, who will tell us more about it. So I will hand over to Libby. Libby.
Hi, Crispin. Hi. Hi, everybody. Yeah, Crispin and I have been talking about this for some time, and today we're launching Activist Corner. And the point of this little part of the show is just 10 minutes where we're going to invite you from anywhere you happen to be in the UK or even in the world for that matter. If you're involved in a campaign, or you're involved in an industrial dispute, or you're involved in a strike even, whatever the issue is that you are involved in organising or you're a part of, we want to hear from you. So every week we will choose someone who's written into us to let us know about what their campaign or dispute is, and what we can do if there's anything we can do to help, to give our solidarity, if there's a strike fund, if it's a campaign that we can broaden out across the UK, if it's a campaign that we can emulate or copy, if someone's doing something in their CLP and it's going well, it's a positive campaign, it's something we can share with the whole of Labour grassroots and do things in our own CLPs. So to kick off today, we've invited Mark Porter from Unite. And Mark, are you there?
I am here, yes. Can you hear me?
Hi, Mark. Welcome to Labour Grassroots. And
thank you.
Mark is a convener of Unite and is involved in the dispute or the strike from the Rolls-Royce in Barnoldswick. And Barnoldswick, for those of you who don't know, and I hadn't heard of it before I heard of this strike, so these workers have put you well and truly on the map, is up north in Lancashire. So Mark, I want you to tell us what has been going on, because obviously the whole point of doing this is because the mass media doesn't really give us a voice when we go on strike. It smears us, tells lies and what have you. So we want you to give us your version, the truth, basically, why you went on strike and what's it all been about.
Thanks, Libby. First of all, before I start, can I say solidarity to all the workers that are currently in dispute at this moment in time, whether that's the porters at Heartlands Hospital, the Octabuses, the DHL workers in Liverpool, the university colleges in Brighton, or of course British Gas that have just started standing on a picket line in this weather. It's cold, it's hard work, it's wet. But that said, if the British Gas workers can't sort some heat out, then no one can. So solidarity to all those workers. Thanks for the opportunity. I think in this current time and this pandemic, I'm going to start with a bit of good news because there's not much of it about at this moment in time. But actually on Friday, I was able to suspend our dispute that's been running for 9 weeks because we have reached agreement in principle with the company, and that is going to be put to the membership next week for them to vote on whether that's acceptable and that's sufficient to end the dispute, which hopefully it will be. So I think that's the first thing. While we're on strike, I mean, if anyone wants to because I appreciate we've only got 10 minutes. If anyone wants to know a bit more about my dispute and why we were, then you can go on YouTube and put the hashtag Battle for Barnoldswick, and there is a 25-minute video, and I appreciate that's long for some people, but it gives you the history of the site and why we're on strike. For those that you don't know, it is the birthplace of the jet engine. It helped in the Battle of Britain, it helped us win the war, and it helped why we can sit here today as free people and we have free speech. So it is a really vital, important part of our history. So I would encourage you to watch that if you get some free time to do so. The basic crux of the matter is on the 26th of August, the company Rolls-Royce announced that it intended to offshore most of our work to our sister plant in Singapore. And this is a plant that we helped set up 10 years ago. Our workers went over to Singapore and helped train the Singaporean workers to make the component parts. And at the time when they did that, it was with assurances, written assurances, that it would not be at the detriment of their jobs and their home work. And here we are 10 years later, and that turned out not to be the case. We then were dealt a further blow, saying that the company intended to offshore the majority of the rest of the work to a subsidiary company in Spain, RTP. And at that point, it was quite simple. We went on strike because we had nothing to lose. You know, that's why.
Thank you, Mark. And I've just seen that someone put in the chat about the strike map. I just wanted to link this in because I know you've written an article that went on, that was published on something called the strike map. I'm just going to share that with people. I can share my screen. So this is an article written by you, Mark, and it's been put up on the strike map, which is a new website, isn't it, for all strikes in the UK. Anyone on strike, involved in a strike, can submit their strike and it will come up on the map. And so anyone who wants to read further about your strike can go there after the show and they can read this article that you've written so that they can get more details about your strike. And also then they can find out about strikes that are happening all across the UK. And if they're in a strike, they can themselves submit that. And just for our audience, we have got someone coming on from Strike Map next week or the week after to tell us all about that. It's a fantastic tool for trades unionists. So I just wanted to ask you, Mark, I mean, this is a fantastic achievement. So congratulations to you and to Unite. What's it been like for you and the workers to be on strike during a pandemic? I mean, how does that work? How have they all been doing that? How's their morale been? And
look, it's difficult for anyone taking strike action at any time. Is difficult. As I wrote in the article, it's not anything anybody relishes. As a convener of the site, it's not career enhancing. It's not CV building. Leading a strike, and it's bloody hard work and difficult. I'll tell you. And it's a team effort. I guess the challenges that the pandemic brought, we just had to be a bit more creative. I did have to stop hundreds of people coming to our picket line to show the support. But what we did, we held virtual picket lines. We did Zooms. We have a screen up in our picket HQ, and we've got a projector. And we just did virtual picket lines with many MPs and many other disputes up and down the country. You just got to get a bit more creative. And I think the big thing for us, we all know that the right-wing mainstream media don't like to report on it, but we have fantastic platforms in social media, and you just got to get creative about some of that stuff as well.
Absolutely, and that's what we're hoping to help with and contribute with, having this special activist corner on our show from now on. And I did hear quite an interesting story about the donations. You've got quite a special and unique story about donations, haven't you, on your picket line? Can you share that with us?
I can, yeah. So during the pandemic, we've actually raised, I think it's now over, we've donated over £7,500 to local charities and good causes during the pandemic, from our striking workers, from homeless people to youngsters. I think we provided over 100 toys at Christmas for deprived children, Christmas decorations for the local hospital. We provided camper vans, hired camper vans, and parked them at a disabled care home when there was an outbreak of COVID for the staff to be able to sleep in. We've done children's cancer charities. The list is endless, and you can follow this just by using the hashtag on any social media platform, the Battle for Barnoldswick. You can see all that on Twitter and everything else, what we did. Children in need and the likes of. We're in a fortunate position, and we did receive donations. I didn't ask for any, but they're all welcome and thank you. But what that allowed us to do, we always do charity work in any sense, but what that allowed us to do, because running the picket line costs money, there's no doubt about that. These disputes cost money. And I think what it allowed us to do, it allowed us to run our picket line, but the donations allowed us to keep doing our charity work as well. And there's twofold for that. It actually helped provide us a social media story to get out there. So as well as doing the charity work, it kept our social media campaign fresh. It gave people a reason to come back to it. And of course, the underlying thing is that deprived children and people less fortunate than ourselves benefited from that. And the logic behind it, we provided a lot of help to food banks, which is a disgrace that we actually have to have food banks in this country, quite frankly. But we did that because if we weren't successful in securing a long-term future for our members, then next year it could have been us using them food banks.
That's an absolutely incredible story that people who are on strike, struggling themselves, fighting for their own jobs, have managed to do so much for other people, and that's absolute credit to you. And congratulations to this, to every single person involved in your dispute. And for anyone watching, just remember that if you want to find out more, all you need to do is put in Battle for Barnoldswick, and I'm sure everybody on the show would like to send their solidarity. Thanks for coming on the show, Mark, and everyone in the audience. Just raise your fist to give some solidarity to Mark and all the comrades there. Solidarity. Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Oh, well, thank you, Libby, and thank you, Mark, and great to hear what you're doing, and looking forward to hearing the next Activist Corner and catching up with other inspiring campaigns. I thought for the we always bring our comedians on after the political stuff, and this is when everyone, a lot of the humorous people, kind of leave. But what I thought, instead of asking them to talk about the newspapers, I thought I'd ask our comedians how they felt when they first did their first gig. How was it to do your first ever performance as a stand-up comedian? I mean, that must have been a long time ago, pre-COVID. Don, are you there, Don?
Yes, I am. Hello, Crispin.
Do you remember your first gig and how you felt, and what happened afterwards? I mean, because you're still kind of gigging now, aren't you? So, I mean, off and on.
My first gig was back in 2006 at the Bedford pub in Balham, and I was really nervous, but the gig went well. Actually, it was the second gig that was horrible. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it gave me that addiction to comedy. I managed to get a few laughs, and from there on, I just kept going, irrespective of whether I was funny or not. I just kept going, and and here I am today.
I remember seeing you when you were quite new, because I was doing gigs at the same time. I remember gigging with you loads, and you had the same sort of style. You had a style similar to now with the wordplay. Your jokes, you cultivated a unique style about wordplay and politics as well. Not many comedians were talking about politics, but you've kept going with that. So did you throw up, or did you faint? Did you feel?
I felt nervous, but I didn't throw up or faint. I've never done that. I just get really nervous, and sometimes I can muffle my words, or the audience can sense it. And obviously that unique style is because I'm slightly autistic as well, so I've never been a natural performer, but I've always had a decent eye for a gag, so I just kept working on my performance, and I've let it just grow organically. So just keep going. The longer you go, anyone who's public speaking, the better you get at it.
And now you're on Radio 4 as well.
Yeah, that was really lucky. Yeah, because of that unique voice, I think it gave me a try. Not many people are talking about politics and having dyspraxia and being Asian, so that helped me loads.
All right. Well, look, I'm going to ask Patrick, who's won an award with millions of people watching on ITV a few years ago, and has been, I think it's appeared at every big venue you've ever seen. Are you there, Patrick?
Hi, good morning, Crispin. Good morning, everyone.
I can't imagine you ever being a new comedian and nervous. What was it like?
Do you know what? I remember, same as when Dunn was saying about your first gig, it was horrific. I remember my first gig was back in 1967, and I had to follow Bob Hope and Tommy Cooper. And it was probably one of the toughest gigs in my life. I remember there was just props everywhere on the stage. There was army helmets everywhere. And and we were just fighting in Korea, I think, at the time. So I didn't even think, I was trying to double up gigs between South Korea, North Korea, and Bangladesh, which none of these countries existed at the time. So I was just really just trying to do as much work as I could, really, because I knew that there was going to be pandemics coming up. So you just sort of have to cash in while, make hay while the time's good.
So it's all been downhill since that first
Yeah, I mean, since Bob Hope stopped getting booked, and I was like his warm-up act, couldn't get gigs anymore. People were like, they go, well, if Bob Hope's not coming, we don't want you, Pat. So there's just no market for it. Awful.
Oh, you won't play along with it.
No, I will. I'll tell you, it was horrific. I remember my first gig, like everyone, do you know what? It's so funny because I am like, and I think people have mentioned it here today. I was listening to people talking about their speaking, and it's so true. If you speak to anyone who does public speaking, same as comics or performers, we're the most shy people you'll ever meet. People always think that, comics, they go, oh my God, I bet you're like, you're dead loud at school. I bet you were always the loudest, you were chatting. Not really. I mean, I remember at school, the only time you used to speak was when you were getting chased and you'd be shouting, stop chasing me. That was the only time you'd really talk, so it was literally, you just grow up, I think, with anything. And loads of people mention, I think public speaking is all about passion. It's about having something to say. And I think Don's hit it on the head there as well when he said, about you talk about your background, you talk about, anyone can talk about, Little Mix, being in the charts or whatever, but who wants, anyone talks about that, but they want to hear about you, they want to hear about your story of, what your fight is or your struggle or what you find funny in the world. And I think that's, and I remember my first gig, a genuine one, was in like a pub in Islington called the Purple Turtle. It's not there anymore. And it's probably like 72 luxury flats now. But it used to be this little pub. And it was hilarious because it was literally just for anyone who could come in. It was like an open mic gig. And this is how badly it was run. They put the pallet, so there was no stage. It was a pallet. They brought in a wooden pallet. They put the pallet. You could put it anywhere in this pub, this bar. They put it right by the door. So basically, when people were coming in, they would open the door and it would smack this pallet, and you're stood there, and everyone's like nervous to death. Everyone's like literally only ever done a gig before. Like I'd never even done a gig. So people just stood there nervous, trying to hold on to this mic stand as if they're on the Titanic. They're going like, this is the only thing that's going to keep you up. And then people just walk in, smack the pallet, and then you're just thrown around, and you're just trying, and your voice is already breaking as you're trying to speak. So I used to do, and it was like this, and I remember before going on, the compere, like the host, he would say, he said to everyone, listen, I know 5 minutes is a long time. Just try your best. Don't come off after a minute. Don't come off after a minute, 2 minutes, because you're already letting yourself down. You're letting everyone else down. Just try and do 4 minutes. Just try and do 4 minutes. So it was horrific, like just thinking, how bad is this, to do 4 minutes? And then I remember going on, and the worst thing is...
Was it 20 minutes later you came off?
Yeah. Oh no, I was still on for that. I was still on until they were literally crisping. The new owners of the pub had come in, they'd sold it, they started building the flats around me. I was still on stage for about 7 years.
they need.
I'm not going. I'm not going anywhere until I get my point across. You know. So it was.
Oh well. I'm going to move on to Suzy now. Suzy.
Hi.
Now, when did you were Funny Woman of the Year in about, I don't know when it was, but you were quite.
It's about 1967. I was on just after Patrick. I'm really pleased that we're talking about this today, because I had a bit of a leg up really with the speaking thing, because I'd worked as an entertainer for a few years. First, I was at Butlins Redcoat, and then I went on to work for Thompson Holidays as an entertainer. So I was used to having a mic in my hand and talking to people. So I'd already got over that part of things. And then when I started doing stand-up, I did an evening class in London, because I'd moved to London. I didn't know anyone, so I went to this evening class. This was before the internet, like before Facebook and everything. And the first few lessons were about how to stand on stage with a microphone and speak into a microphone. So I'd already been doing that for years. And when I worked at Butlins, this was 1998, right? Showing me age now. I've got show and tell, by the way. You know me. That this is when I got the job as a redcoat. I was in my local paper. Look at that lovely bit. Look, so sweet. I don't know why I didn't cut off the bit about drug user sentence. I don't know why I didn't cut that bit off. But then I got the job, and they continuously spelt my name wrong in the paper. So I was promised this glittering showbiz career in Butlins, right? Which it was not. I mean, the reality is very different, but I'd wanted to do it since I was a child. I was really pleased. And I did a couple of things on the microphone, because we used to go to Noddy's Toyland, and I used to have to compare Noddy. And you know, this was a very small audience of eager children and their parents, and they had a big venue where they did all the shows in the evening. And I remember one time, one of the main compares in the show bar, which was about 3,000 people, he was off sick. So I went to the manager and said, could I compare in the show bar? And these are the exact words he said to me. He said, we prefer male compares because women's voices don't carry as well. So, you know, that was a bit of a, okay, I won't be doing this job for long then. And that was when I went and got the job for Thompson, who let me do everything, and I learned on the job. But that's interesting about they wouldn't let female be compares. I mean, apparently my voice wouldn't carry. I mean, that's what a microphone's for, right? But years later, I compared the Moonwalk, the breast cancer charity event in Hyde Park in London, and there was about 16,000 people in the audience, and I'm sure the people at the back could hear me. So in your face, that manager. But seriously though, how bad is that? I mean, it was 1998, so I hope that they've changed since then. But you know, I now compare, I do comedy, and I've always felt comfortable with a mic in my hand, so I was lucky in that way. But can I just say, I've noticed a few people on the chat talking about public speaking. If you go to the Funny Women website, funnywomen.com, they do a lot of workshops and things for people public speaking, and it's a really friendly way to do it. I've been to a few of their workshops, and it's not just if you want to be a comedian, people who have to speak in work, people who have to do, you know, stand up in front of people and they need their confidence. It gives you those skills, and you meet lovely people, and it's very casual. So please go on there. I saw Mia was commenting, go on there and have a look, and they're doing lots of Zoom stuff, and you can meet like-minded people. You can you know, have a go, and it's a really friendly, nice way to do it. And I've done a lot with them, so that's really nice. But yeah, I used to hate my accent, Crispin. I know you probably can't understand that because my voice is obviously amazing. But that was one of my things I used to hate when I heard myself. But then the last year I got my first ever voiceover job, so I can't be that bad. I mean, accents are all quite in now, aren't they?
Yeah, I think you've got a great accent.
Yeah, so, you know, I just think just be yourself. Don't try and be anyone else. Don't try and talk posh or anything, because people like you for you. And if you have to speak in front of people, just don't try and be something you're not. Just be yourself. And that seems to have got me where I am today, which is sat in my mum's house on a Zoom with no pants on.
All right, well, I've got to move on because we're really late. But thanks a lot, Don and Patrick.
Cheers, thank you.
Again, for coming
Love
on.
you all.
Love you.
Take care.
Great to see you all. And I'm going to speak to Rob. Rob, are you there?
I am. Hello.
How are you doing?
Good morning. All right. That was a really good program, wasn't it?
What was it like for you the first time you did a gig?
exciting. I mean, I'm lucky because I share all those inadequacies that Patrick was talking about. But I worked out at an early age that the way to overcome that was to play a guitar. So I sadly still love guitars, but I think I just love to play guitar. So I was really excited because I was going to play guitar really loudly in Hounslow Youth Club.
All right.
To nobody.
Where's Hounslow Youth Club? Is that opposite the Hounslow West Station? Is it Hounslow East Station?
No, yeah, that's it. Yeah. By Kingsley Road, yeah.
Oh, I've been in a Labour meeting there.
Yeah.
It's terrible acoustics.
It was a dismal. It was to be objective, a really disappointing rock and roll start to life. But I was just so excited, and that's the point for me. The point of playing guitar is I don't have to talk to people then.
Hounslow Youth Centre. Wow, that's amazing. We should get a plaque put up there.
I think they've locked it down now.
I'm sure the MP Ruth Cadbury would be happy to do that.
Yeah.
So Rob, you haven't got a song for today, have you?
I have. Do you want to hear the possible theme tune?
Yeah. Well, I haven't spoken to anyone about this. Is all this is brand new, but I can. This is for the 209 people here. We're planning on a new theme tune for, especially for Not the Andrew Marr Show, and I asked Rob if he would come up with a tune. And are you ready to?
Let's give it a go, shall we?
Give it a go. Yeah, I'd like to hear this.
Yeah, okay.
I'm hearing it the first time as well as everyone else. So let's see lots of thumbs up and.
I hope so.
And all that.
Otherwise, it's back to Hounslow Youth Club for Rob. Where you gonna find the people make the world go round? On a Sunday morning, the activated, dedicated, liberated can be found. On a Sunday morning, where you go to find what the papers won't be saying. So wake yourself up with a radical cup of solidarity. I'll give you a clue. It's not the Andrew Marr Show. You find it on Zoom. It's not the Andrew Marr Show. It's got comedians too. Not those clowns in smart grey suits. It's not the Andrew Marr Show.
Wow, that's amazing.
Fabulous.
That's got Sunday morning written all over it. That one.
Good.
Cup of tea and a little, and not the Andrew Marr Show, and the solidarity. What a great wordplay. So yeah, I think it's a little bit Velvet Undergroundy.
Yeah. A bit. What we want is to get Mo Tucker singing it, really, don't we?
She was a drummer as well. Did she sing? What did she sing in the Velvet Underground?
She sang After Hours. If you close the door, the night will last forever. Leave the wine glass out and say hello to never.
I don't know.
I'm a bit obsessive about the Velvet Underground.
Where's that? Is that on an album?
Yeah, it's oh god, it's on 1960. Never featured on one of the main albums. I think it's 1969.
Because I know that obviously the Nico was on some of that Banana one, but
I love Nico.
Yeah,
she probably better not ask Mo Tucker because I think she joined the Tea Party later.
Did she?
Yeah, and then admitted it was a mistake, but she did join the Tea Party. Yeah.
Oh well, we can't have that.
We can't. No.
We can have the Solidarity Party, but not the Tea Party. Right. So. Should we end with the red flag thing?
Why not?
Should we get some solidarity on the red flag? There's still 195 here.
Wow.
We've kept going for another half hour, which is pretty good. And next week we're going to do a show on with tips for public speaking on the Sunday, and on Wednesday we're discussing what to do on that at the moment. Wednesday evening. Okay. Sorry, I shouldn't have gone in again.
I'll start the song.
Yeah.
The people's flag is deepest red. It's shrouded off down on martyr dead. And ere their limbs grew stiff and cold, their heart's blood dyed its every fold. So raise the scarlet standard high, beneath its shade we live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we keep the red flag flying here. It waved above our infant might, when all ahead seemed dark as night. It's witnessed many a deed and vow, we shall not change its colour now. So raise the scarlet standard high, beneath its shade we live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we keep the red flag flying here. And it well recalls our triumphs past, and gives us hope of peace at last. This symbol banner bright, this symbol plain, of human rights and humanity's gain. So raise the scarlet standard high, beneath its shade we live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we keep the red flag flying here. So raise the scarlet standard high, beneath its shade we live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we keep the red flag flying